All right, let's talk about the Industrial Revolution. Now, you've probably heard the version of the story that's all about amazing inventions and incredible progress. But that's not the whole picture, not even close. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain and look at the darker side, the hidden price that regular people paid for all that progress.
So that really brings us to the big question we've got to ask. Was the Industrial Revolution all about progress? Or was it actually a time of incredible pain for the very people who built it with their bare hands? Let's dig into the evidence, and you can decide for yourself.
So you've got these two totally different stories, right? On one side, there's the shiny textbook version, new machines, things getting made faster than ever, and the country getting richer. But then there's the hidden story, the one we're going to focus on. And that story is all about exploitation, constant danger, and a cycle of poverty so deep it could trap a family for generations. Okay, so how did things get so bad? To understand that, we have to look at the system itself and, well, the guys who were in charge. This was the age of the monopoly, an era where one thing mattered more than anything else: profit. People? They came a distant second. Behind all of this was one simple, powerful idea that people at the time called the law of market. And it's pretty straightforward. Make stuff for the lowest possible cost so you can make the most possible money. That's it. That one single idea drove every single decision, from who got a job to how they were treated at that job. And that idea, it leads straight to something called a monopoly. A monopoly is when one company gets so powerful, it basically owns an entire industry. I mean, think about it. If you're the only game in town, you can charge whatever you want, you can make your product however you want, there's nobody to stop you. So, the guys who built these massive companies, they got a nickname. And trust me, it was not a compliment. They were called robber barons. And that name meant exactly what it sounds like, that they got filthy rich by being absolutely ruthless, unethical, and sometimes just plain cruel. Just to give you a sense of the insane power we're talking about, look at this number, 90%. What on earth could one single company control 90% of? Well, by the 1880s, one guy, John D. Rockefeller, and his company Standard Oil controlled 90% of the entire oil business in America. With that much power, he could do whatever he wanted. He wasn't just the king of oil. He could boss around other massive industries, like the railroads, forcing them to give him special treatment. So this whole system, driven by profit at all costs, it led to some really dark places. And maybe the most heartbreaking of all was the reality of child labor. We're not talking about a summer job here. We're talking about kids having their entire childhoods bought and sold. Get this. Around the year 1900, there were an estimated 2 million children under the age of 16 working full-time jobs in America. 2 million. Let that sink in for a second. They weren't in school, they weren't playing, they were stuck in factories, dark mines, and mills. And we're talking young. I mean, really young. A labor activist named Mother Jones wrote about seeing 6-year-olds with faces of 60. She even saw toddlers, 4-year-olds, being brought into the mills to help their families, working for absolutely no pay at all. And here's the coldest part. This wasn't some kind of accident. It was all done on purpose. The factory machines were often built low to the ground. Why? Because they were specifically designed for the small bodies and quick hands of children. It was literally part of the business model. And the danger was off the charts. One worker, Oscar Neeb, said something that just stops you in your tracks. He said the factory system created more cripples than the war with the South. Think about that for a minute. More kids were getting maimed and permanently injured by machines at work than soldiers were during the entire Civil War. It's just unbelievable. And here's the trap. You might think, well, at least the families earned some money, right? Wrong. Child labor didn't solve poverty. It actually made it permanent. Parents needed their kids' wages just to survive, which meant the kids could never go to school. Then the brutal work would break their bodies. So when they grew up, they couldn't get better jobs, which meant their children would have to go to work. The cycle just kept going and going and going. But it wasn't just the kids, Life for adult workers was just as brutal. Let's take a look at the human cost for literally everyone on the factory line. You have to understand, before all these factories took over, a lot of families had a little something for themselves. Maybe a pig or a small garden to grow some potatoes. They weren't rich, but they had a little bit of independence. The factory system wiped that all out. All of a sudden, your family's survival was 100% dependent on a single factory paycheck. And earning that paycheck could cost you your body. The stories are just graphic. In the pickle factories, acid was so strong it would literally eat away the joints of a worker's fingers. In the slaughterhouses, butchers would use their thumbs so much for cutting that eventually their thumbs would just stop working forever. And here's the kicker. If you got hurt on the job, or even killed, your family got zero. Nothing. Not as compensation, as one person put it. An injury didn't just mean you were in pain. It meant your entire family was probably going to starve. So, if the factory owners didn't care about their workers, you can probably guess how much they cared about their customers. And nowhere was that more obvious and, frankly, more disgusting than in the food industry. This whole thing blew up when a writer named Upton Sinclair published a novel called The Jungle. Now, his goal was to expose the terrible conditions for immigrant workers, but what people really freaked out about were his descriptions of how their food was made. As he famously said, "I aimed at the public's heart, and by accident, I hit it in the stomach." Okay, brace yourself because this is pretty gross. Here's basically the recipe for sausage back then. You'd start with spoiled meat, whatever had fallen on the dirty floor. Then you'd mix in dirt, sawdust, spit, anything. Rats were everywhere, so their droppings just got swept into the pile. Oh, and to kill the rats, they'd put out poisoned bread, and when it was all said and done, the rats, the poisoned bread, and the meat would all go into the grinder together. And if you think that's bad, it actually gets worse. There were stories of workers falling into these giant rendering vats and just becoming part of Durham's pure leaf lard. And companies would straight up lie. This stuff they called devialed ham was really just garbage parts like beef throats and potato skins, all dyed and spiced so you'd never know the difference. So you see the pattern here, right? You've got the monopolies, the child labor, the dangerous factories, the contaminated food. These aren't all separate problems. They're all symptoms of the exact same thing, a system that put profit above all else. And understanding these flaws is absolutely crucial, because these kinds of debates are still happening today. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. After hearing all of this, from the robber barons and the kids in the factories to the dangerous jobs and the poisoned food, which one of these flaws do you believe was the most harmful, the most damaging to society, and why? That's the real conversation worth having.